Welcome back to the Animals at Home podcast. My name is Dylan Perrin, and thank you so much for tuning in today. Today, I'm speaking with Mike Tytula, who is a familiar face on the podcast. I think this is his fourth episode we've recorded with him. Of course, he's got a very popular YouTube channel at Alpha Reptile as well, so many of you will already be familiar with him. On this episode, we discuss his most recent trip to Colombia. Well, his first trip to Colombia, his most recent reptile herp-related trip. And in this trip, he was dedicated to finding different species of dart frog. And he walks us through the episode of the species he found and some of the insights he's collected along the way, which I think are very keen insights about how to interpret the data you find while you're collecting or looking at wild samples in the wild, which is just a really interesting part of the conversation. So if you are somebody who wants to eventually get into seeing animals in the wild on different trips across the world, then this is an episode that you'll want to listen to because you'll pick up on a ton of different tips for how to do this successfully and actually find animals when you go to these places. We also discussed the trip to Madagascar he took a year ago with other familiar reptile-related content creators. That part of the conversation is not only fascinating, but also quite depressing. But I think it's a really important conversation to have. So that I thoroughly enjoyed. And we finished the conversation discussing Mike's reptile room. Of course, he works on that room with his girlfriend, Bree. They have an amazing few different projects. And I've been to their room. I stayed at their house, I think maybe 2 years ago. And I think they just do such a good job caring for their animals and at the quantity that they have. And it's always fascinating to hear someone how they manage that space. So without anything further, let's jump into this conversation. Enjoy. All right. Well, Mike, welcome back to the podcast. I want to say this is like number 4 for you.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. We did a couple and then we did a big round table and then here we are.
Yeah. And it's because you keep going on trips. Although I realized that we never talked about Madagascar either. That was a trip that you went on last year. So maybe at some point we can get a little bit of info on that as well, because I think that'd be interesting. But you just came back from what looked like a pretty incredible trip to Colombia. I don't think have you published anything on the channel about it yet?
Nothing on the YouTube. No, I've posted a few photos and some stories and stuff on Instagram, but nothing yet on the channel.
No videos. I'm sure those are to come.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're getting worked on.
well, let's rewind the clock. Let's just talk to me about what made you decide to. I mean, I think you're just an adventurous person, and it seems like you're always wanting to get out there. But you just came back from Madagascar not that long ago, so to head back out within under a year or within a year, what was the reason?
Yeah, I mean, I've always, especially now, the living situation that we're in, we have cheap rent. We thankfully, there's kind of pros and cons, but both Bree can't really do these due to physical limitations, and so it allows me to get out of the house, and she gets to take over of the reptile room for a week, or I guess 2 in this case. And I really wanted to see the frogs behind me, the Oophaga histrionica, in the wild. And so it was actually before Madagascar that we had been working on this trip.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a ton to put together. Thankfully, I didn't have a whole lot to do with it. I was pretty just kind of like the decision maker, like, okay, I want to see this frog. Yeah, I want to see this frog. And the company we went with, Sierra Wild, who we actually did go to Costa Rica with as well. They offer herping tours kind of all over the place, especially in Costa Rica. If you're there, highly recommend them. But in general, that was kind of my outlet to be like, you know what? Yeah, let's do this. These are the guys that I want to do it with. And they started planning. So a year and a half later, pretty much, it finally came to fruition, and we were on a plane at 11 p.m.
That's awesome. So it was obviously the same crew that did the tour for you guys in Costa Rica. Basically, when you left Costa Rica, were you just already thinking, I want to go somewhere else with them?
Yeah, I mean, definitely it was of interest. I didn't have any plans at that time, but it was kind of like, hey, these guys are cool. Like, they treated us really well. The trip was incredible. And, you know, I want to bring them money as much as I want to go other places. So help support them, and they take us to cool places.
And then was it the decision to go to Colombia mainly because of the Oophaga histrionica, or was there just other reasons?
Yeah, pretty much 100%. Just all the like large obligates that live there is something that I really prioritize doing. I love seeing the animals in the wild, and that's something that I wanted to act upon, and I did.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and as we've talked about before, and we will get into, obviously, it gives you a totally different perspective of keeping them, and the information that you can pick up in situ is totally different than reading online or even reading academic journals and whatnot. Being there, feeling the temperatures, feeling the humidity is so different. I want to ask you about that as well, but. So when you started planning the trip, was it just you, or were you looking for? Because I know you'd even asked me if I wanted to come. Obviously, the timing is not great for me at this in March, but you had asked a bunch of people. Was it just did you need a certain amount of people to go with you, or were you going to kind of go anyway?
I was going to go anyway. I know a lot of people, especially when I started asking again in like January, after I had enough people to just kind of fill the amount of people that I wanted to get in there. A lot of them bailed kind of last minute, and it's like, okay, well, I think it's going to be kind of unreasonable to ask people, hey, you got 3,200 US sitting in your bank that you want to come to Colombia with? And a couple of people were interested, but it ended up just totally falling through with the added. I basically wanted one extra person. And a lot of people mentioned that, oh, I know how these trips work and you're just getting it for cheaper, like per person or whatever. And I was like, no, like the charge that I am being charged is what I'm passing to whatever customers. Like there's no markup for me. I'm not making any money doing this. Like it's just straight up what it is what it is. Like come on the trip. I want, to build a friendship and to have a great time with a bunch of people. It's nothing to do really with money. So
yeah.
It started off just me. And obviously I asked you, I asked a whole bunch of people. Like I asked Dion, Zach Porritt from A Life Exotic. I asked him. I asked the crew that we went to Madagascar with. I asked Adam, so many people, but it was all it wasn't last minute, but honestly, the answer that I got from most people was like, I can't make it work, but I have a feeling it was, I'm too scared.
Yeah. Because it's a big commitment, right? A, you're spending a lot of money, and B, you're going to Colombia. It could be an uncomfortable, you can tell me how different it is from something like Costa Rica. Costa Rica I've been to, obviously it's quite Americanized. You can get away from that, but it's also very tourist centric. Is Colombia like that as well, or is it a totally different vibe?
Definitely totally different. It's starting to become more, I guess, politically stable in a certain sense, and also just more tourist friendly. I think they're starting to realize that, like, oh, hey, the cartels and all these groups are not trying to pillage our tourists, then we get more money. Like,
yeah,
it's a pretty simple equation in that sense, and it's definitely getting there. I know over the course of the planning, like it's changing. The pricing is changing so much there that like they increased the price just due to like increased travel and stuff like that. So like price, or the flights were getting more pricey because we took 5 within country flights.
Wow.
So that's kind of where the high number that I mentioned earlier, like the 3,200, that's what it costed to go. Minus your
and that
flights.
Covers, so that doesn't cover the initial flights to get to Colombia, but it covers the while you're there.
Correct. Yeah, it covers 3 meals a day, lodging, all the flights while we were there, all the local guides, the tips, like everything. So it was kind of all inclusive in that sense. But yeah, you had to get yourself there.
Yeah. But at least once you're there, you don't have to overthink anything. You can just actually enjoy the trip, look for animals, and you're not thinking, what are we going to eat next? How much am I supposed to tip this guy? How are we going to find someone that can actually find these animals for us? It's all taken care of.
Oh, yeah. And with Colombia, it's a lot different than Costa Rica, say, just because, like, there is still a lot of the country that isn't safe to go to, or is only safe if you know this one specific person or these few specific people that will take you to these places. And so having them was critical to this whole trip, because if not, like, I noticed very quickly that Costa Rica is actually much more diverse and more species rich, as well as more dense in terms of the actual like populations that are there. Driving Costa Rica, if you're driving slowly at night or just walking the roads or whatever, you'll find a good bunch of stuff. Like you'll hit, I know we hit like glass frogs, red-eye tree frogs, bullet ants, fertile ants, a whole bunch of different stuff just walking a road there. Sure, it might have been like a specific road or whatever, but still it's possible. Whereas like Colombia, we didn't really do a lot of night herping. I think we went a total of 3 times. But just in general, like the hikes while we were hiking, we'd be hiking, for 6 hours a day or plus, and we'd find, 3, 4 animals on some days.
So you need somebody
specifically. Oh yeah, you have to.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
I mean, you might find, house geckos or morning geckos or whatever if you're just kind of on your own, but you have to have a local guide there. Otherwise, you won't be able to take the land. Like there's a high likelihood you'll get captured by somebody.
Yeah. So not only are you not going to see interesting animals, you may end up being captive somewhere else.
Correct. Yeah. You'll be the one in the box, not the frogs.
Exactly. Yeah. So why don't you tell us who came with you? I think some people, it'd be familiar faces for some, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We had one drop out midway, so I can tell that story a bit later. But Aeroidaholic, my buddy David came with us. Tyler and Logan Vetro came with us. They're from TLV Exotics on Instagram. Kayla Roach came with us. Kayla's Critters, and Nick, Mr. Vivarium, and then myself. So
yeah, so pretty good crew.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was a great crew. Yeah.
So can you tell us about, like you mentioned that you were on a plane at 11 p.m. So can you talk about the trip to get there? What was that like?
Yeah, we got to the airport, 3 hours in advance. We waited. We ended up, I think our flight got delayed a little bit, and then just flying. We flew straight from Toronto to Bogota, the capital city of Colombia. So, and it was only a 5.5 hour or 6 hour flight. Like it really wasn't bad at all. And that was just a red eye. So we ended up landing at like 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. their time. And our tour guides actually didn't land until like 4 p.m. So we ended up just chilling in the airport for pretty much the whole time. Like we were all dead tired, obviously, not much sleep on a plane. And then we explored a little bit. We ordered some coffee, and then kind of towards noonish, we're all fading a little. And there's a little shop outside the airport that we went to and got like our first taste of Colombian food, which we had some empanadas, which were actually some of the best empanadas we had. The entire trip was actually at the airport, ironically.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then the tour guides got there, our bus got there, and off to the races.
And so I assume they had a plan about where you're going to stop. Did you have an idea of like the places that you wanted to go, or did you kind of just leave that in their hands?
I kind of gave them just the general species, like obviously all the morphs and stuff, like the hobby names that we call them, like the fuego, or the small form redhead, the big redhead, like the large form redhead, that kind of deal. That's all just hobby names. Like they know them as Ufaga histrionica or Ufaga enchicayensis, or like their actual scientific names. So I kind of gave them a list of like, I'd really like to see this, and then they'd counter like, not gonna happen. Like, chill. And before the trip actually started, I had the opportunity to go to Tesoros de Colombia, which is where all these frogs from Colombia are actually from.
Yeah, so if anyone remembers, like the episode I did with Dr. Alec Brown a few months back, he talked about that import, and you are obviously part of the import as well. So that's where those. Maybe you could just quickly give like a 1-minute description of what that is, how that organization works.
Yeah, essentially they are like, the parents are owned by the government. They breed the frogs. The frogs they then sell to the hobby, legal exports. Everything's all legally done, which is a very important factor, especially for frogs from Colombia. And then they basically use the money and stuff that they gain from that to run their facility, as well as buy land and protect land. Mm-hmm. So they also have they have a second foundation called EVAC. I don't remember the actual. 1 second here.
Yeah, take a look. Because it is like a perfect loop. It's like using the hobby to generate cash to support the actual wildlife management, which is, exactly what you want to see.
Yeah. So it's the Amphibian Conservation Education and Research.
Okay.
So they do. Oh no, that's not them actually. What?
That's a competitor.
Yeah, it's a competitor. That's from Panama, so that's not them.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to find it another time. I
Yeah.
can't remember exactly what it is, or Julio will yell at me once this goes live. But
But you actually got to go to the Tesoros facility?
Yeah, it was just me. I was the only one that was permitted, just because I basically went under the like permitting, I guess, paperwork of like a journalist. So I
Okay.
was there. I recorded a video. I saw as much as I possibly could, or as much as they would allow me to see, I guess. And yeah, it was very cool to see kind of a breeder style setup that is set for as much production as possible with the frogs behind us.
And what was your impressions? Like, was it a pretty clean, like well-run lab?
Yeah, it was like the new buildings especially were really, really nice. The first building that they ever built, I mean, it's been something like 10 or 15 years since they first started. I believe the first actual import was 2015, or export, I guess, for them was 2015 or 14. I might have that information wrong, but it was around then, like give or take a year or two. Um, and they had started, I think, about 6 years before that. So yeah, it's been, a good 15 years. And just hearing the bureaucracy that goes into even like moving a tank in their facility is insane. So that
Really?
first building, they were smaller setups, there were grow outs, like that kind of stuff. But the rest of the facility was pretty nice. Like that one was very cramped and very tight quarters, but it was still well run and well maintained. The rest of the facilities were larger enclosures, more space, that kind of stuff.
And that's something that you'll kind of include in your video, I'm sure, when you get that published. So
Yeah.
people will be able to see that. That's cool.
Yeah, that'll be the first video that I post.
Okay, cool. So we can look forward to that. So was that your first stop, basically?
Yeah, so we got there, like we left Friday night, we got there Saturday morning. This was Sunday, so we just stayed in an Airbnb in Bogota for those, I guess, 2 days. The guys, like the rest of the group, obviously weren't able to come with me, so they just kind of, I think they went to a mall. They had some like fried chicken or something. They just lived it up in Bogota for a day, had a few beers, and then we ended up getting back kind of nighttime ish, and yeah, just got ready for the trip.
And then what was the first big hike slash herping expedition?
So the first trip was a flight to Bogota on the Monday, or to Cali, sorry, on the Monday, and then essentially just travel to Anchicaya, where we were going to have our first few fun little hikes. The first one that we ended up going on was probably the second most challenging hike of the trip. And that was to find the Red Limani. That was basically, straight down the side of a cliff to near Riverside. And it was challenging. I mean, I'm no physical specimen by any means, but everybody struggled. And I mentioned that one of our crew members ended up having to leave early, and he just through a whole mixture of different things. He didn't make it on the first hike, the first two hikes that we went on, because we went on a day trip to there, and then close by there's or I guess not really all that close by, a couple hours away, there's like a bird sanctuary ish, like a cafe almost. And there's like a night hike that you can do around there. So we ended up doing a night hike there, and he was feeling a little bit better at that point, but he
like, was he
didn't
sick?
come
Is
with
that
us.
like he had a illness type thing? You don't have to share too much.
Yeah, he essentially, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, like obviously, but he I don't think he was really prepared. This was kind of his first trip to leave the country, and I think it was a lot more than he expected. Also, there was some anxiety medication that was reacting with gravel that
Mm.
made him like feel real awful. So I don't know exactly what it is. But essentially, yeah, like he was throwing up. He couldn't eat. He didn't eat for pretty much the whole week he was there. He had like
Oh my
little
God.
bites of food. And that's pretty much it. So
So obviously
uh,
the concept of hiking into the middle of a jungle was not something that made sense for him to do.
yeah, so that first day he stayed back. Then ironically, the second day, which was the harder hike, like long, I think it was about 3 kilometers one way, 2.5, 3 kilometers one way, um, and virtually, up a mountain. And then you just hit like a random cow pasture, and it's like it was, I think it was 35 degrees Celsius with about 90% humidity there.
Oh my God.
So just, I mean, picture walking through an open field, like let alone in the tree canopy, you're dumping sweat, just just so much sweat. But then you hit that sunshine and it's just a killer. Like
Yeah.
it was rough. So, but he made that hike, which was shocking. We were all so happy. Like he struggled. It definitely wasn't easy, but he did it. So we're really proud of him for that.
Was the terrain like Costa Rica was with like the slippery mud, or are you talking more like rock type climbing? No, not climbing, but like stepping onto like, drier rocks.
more it was basically dryish dirt. Like it
Okay.
was like Costa Rica, but being the one of the most or when one of the areas that has the most rainfall of anywhere in the world, being the Chacon rainforest in Colombia, um, we only got rained on 3 times, something like that. Like and not torrential downpours. That happened, but it was at the very end of the trip. But the first like week we were there, we didn't see any rain. So I think that did kind of hurt our ability to see frogs as well, and just animals in general, because it was
Yeah.
so hot and just wasn't raining enough. Um, but essentially the same terrain as like Costa Rica.
And I think I remember asking this before, but the tour guides, are they phased by the hikes, or they're so used to it by now that they can just crank through those things?
The local guides, like they walk those pathways like 3 4 times a day, so they're just up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down. And, you know, I had my like 40-pound camera bag with us, and it was
Right.
like, I was struggling, I'll admit. And but I wanted to do it for myself. Like I was like, no, I'm not giving my bag to somebody. Like this is the hardest hike. I want to complete it. Like I want to push through, and I did. So that was nice. But then Tyler Vetro, one of the boys on the trip, is basically offered to take my bag a few times, like for easier hikes. But I was like, yeah, you know what? I proved myself here. Take it.
Yeah, I got my medal on the first or the second hike, so we can you can take it from here.
Yeah, yeah, and that was the hike to go see the yellow limani, and unfortunately, we got skunked. So
Mm.
we were up there searching for probably 2 hours ish, and just couldn't find them.
Did you find
Unfortunately,
the red lamani as well? Like that was in the second hike, or?
that was on the first one. Yeah,
Oh,
that
okay,
was day one. Sorry, I jumped to day two already.
yeah. But
Yeah,
you found the red one, red lamani? Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Was
and
it
there
pretty
were
easy to find? Like, was there lots of them, or was it just like one specimen that you happened to find?
no, it was actually the tour guide that found 2 specimens. And again, like I said, it was so dry. They were literally like hiding under leaves. Like they weren't
Mm.
out, they weren't doing really anything. So it was not necessarily an easy. Can you hear that?
No. What
Okay,
is it?
good.
What's the sound?
It's like a vacuum
Oh yeah, no,
upstairs.
no, I can't hear it. No, you're
Okay,
good.
good. Yeah, it was challenging to find them, and truthfully, we wouldn't have found them if it wasn't for that tour guide.
Yeah, yeah.
So
But at least I guess even if you don't find them, as disappointing as that is, you're still in the area that they live, so you can still pick up a lot on what their habitat's like. Because I'm sure the tour guides are saying they are here. This is where they live, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah, and I think something as kind of a general message to everybody that might be listening to this or watches people on YouTube that travel and share kind of rigid, I was here, this is what it is. You were there for one day or maybe a week out of a year, taking data at one instant, and you're preaching that as like gospel. So that's something that I do. I record, I recorded some UVI values, I recorded temperatures, stuff like that. But it I'm very aware that that is the case. Like that's something that everybody has to keep in mind when they're watching or looking for those people in the field that post that kind of information, because it's critical that you understand that temperatures change, precipitation changes, everything changes over a year. You think here, if you were to find a salamander and you're taking it, right in the very beginning of when they're starting to go to the vernal pools, and it's -5 degrees outside. It's like, yeah, this is what they live in all the time. You fly in, fly out, take your data. That's what it is. Like that's essentially what you're preaching, right? Like everything fluctuates. So something to keep in mind just for the audience, because
that's a really great
I don't want
point.
to claim that it's like, I took these readings, this is exactly how it is.
Yes. Yeah, it's so true. I mean, exactly like you said, it's such a small data point. It's a valuable data point. You don't want to write it off as something that's not there. You're still there. You're able to see kind of what things look like, the humidity, the temperature. But it is one day at one point in one season. It's not a big enough picture. Now in the tropics, obviously things are slightly more static. There's less like swing, but still, I mean, if you're not there for the wet, cold season when it's raining every day and maybe it's getting down to 15, 16 degrees or even cooler, I don't know, you don't have that information. So you have to take it with a grain of salt.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it's important to keep that in mind. And like another thing to think about is also, if you're going to be, taking that data, and is that applicable to, your box back here, or the vivariums that you're keeping your animals in? Like, okay, sure. I took a data point and it was 30 degrees outside. Am I going to want that? Like, are the frogs actually out bounding around? And some of them in this case were, but are they exposing them to themselves, or are they exposing them to themselves that regularly to that temperature? Are they, is it just kind of a fluke? Like, are they more using the microhabitats that exist, where, like I said, the red lamani were all under leaves and hidden during the heat of the day because it hadn't rained for a few days.
Yeah.
So
I forget what, I'm going to butcher this quote, but the quote is something like, there's nothing more dangerous than somebody who has part of the information, like you have a little bit of information, and then you just are like, okay, yeah, it's like gotta be 35 degrees or whatever it is. Like you do have to take it with a grain of salt, like I said, and build that picture over time. And were you able to pick up anything about like the forest floor, like more decor type elements that stood out to you that you weren't already incorporating?
The amount of leaf litter is something that it didn't really stand out to me. Like, I have been in tropical environments before, but definitely took note of the composition of the soil in a lot of places was relatively clayey. I'm sure that's the scientific term. Jeez, I'm butchering this. Yeah, I'm sure that's a scientific term. And nothing else is like jumping out at me right now. I'm sure when I'm looking through some of the footage and stuff, I'll see a few more things. But just the amount of leaf litter is probably kind of what is something that is the most useful for the hobbyist to do. Like, it's really, 2 inches ish, I would say, on average. And then you kind of get down to very clay-like soil, at least where we were walking.
Yeah.
Especially in like the Phyllobates terribilis habitat. Like, it was very clayey. You're stepping and it was, I mean, literally like you were stepping in clay. It was just like bright orange.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have a pretty level head about going to these places and making sure that you're not misinterpreting data, but you also have a strong pull to go there to see the animals in the wild. Like, what's the reason that you want to see them there? I mean, I'm sure there's an element of basing your care, but is it more so just so you can see them?
Yeah, I mean, I think Madagascar was the highlight of that. Certainly in Colombia, there is deforestation and climactic changes are very much skewing amphibian populations, whether that's the spread of chytrid or, decreasing rain amounts, that kind of deal. To me, the highlight for that kind of point was Madagascar. Like, I can right now. And, if we have kids or, when you have a mortgage and all that stuff, life gets harder to make those big trips. That's for sure. And the second factor being there's a chance that they're not going to be there much longer. Certainly, you hear, I think there's somebody, I can't remember if it was on your podcast or on Dan Amphibicast, but they were talking in Panama where some Ranitameo were found on like the side of a road, and 2 years goes by and they come back and that whole patch forest is gone. And
right.
Okay, well, guess those frogs aren't there anymore. That's good to know. And even they're like, some people in Colombia were trying to get permits for a frog to go see it essentially, and they got the permits 2 years after they applied, and the whole population was gone. So That's just gone. Like there's no chance that frog will be there anymore. So that's kind of the main drive. Is as sad as it is, it's especially bad in Madagascar, where even 3 years ago, we had a drone clip of like the side of a mountain going down to where the Parsons chameleons are found. And somebody that travels to Madagascar all the time and knows where that place is basically said, wow, the last time I was there, this was all like primary rainforest. And now the side of that mountain is just clear cut, gone.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you think of how much or how many species live in that specific patch of rainforest. Well, it doesn't mean much to, I guess, the local people, or they have to use it to survive, essentially. Those species in there, who knows? Maybe there was one specific kind of frog that was found in that one patch of rainforest, and now it's gone.
Yeah.
And it's a very sad reality, but that's kind of the main drive, as depressing as that might sound.
Yeah. I remember when you came home from Madagascar, we talked on the phone. I'm like, how's the trip? And you're like, depressing. As amazing as the trip was, we could talk about that as well. Incredible experience seeing every, animal on your bucket list, but you just get this real visceral example of the destruction of nature. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And it's such a sensitive topic to talk about, because it's like, okay, well, people need to live. These families are just doing what they can to make the, few cents a week that allow them to feed their family. And to us, it's completely foreign. It's like, well, it shouldn't be like that. We shouldn't be cutting down forests, and, we have to preserve this, but to them it's survival.
Yeah.
And it's a very sensitive topic to kind of pull things out of and dance around that fine line of not taking it too far on one side. But, we're all animal lovers here, and I'm sure most of the viewers are too. And it still is very challenging to see, especially the deforestation.
Yeah. So that makes sense. That makes sense why you're so driven to these places to get your glimpse of these animals. And so, okay, so you saw the red lamani, you tried to see the yellow lamani. I think that was on the second day. What was the next kind of major highlight? I'd like to take a quick break to thank today's show sponsor, Tomaskas Ltd. Many of you are probably already familiar with Tomaskas, as the founder has been on the podcast before. That's Thomas Griffiths. Last summer, we did a podcast called The Fundamentals of Lighting, and if you are any way confused by lighting, you must go listen to that episode, because we break it down in very simplistic terms. Tomaskas is an independent animal and husbandry consultant, as well as a research and development consultant. Thomas works behind the scenes to help improve lighting technology for everything from just a keeper like you and I, all the way up to really high-level zoos. Thomas has an incredible amount of experience, from testing lighting technology all the way to actually making sure it's implemented properly in the field, which makes him uniquely positioned to give lighting advice for animals in captivity. He works with all taxa, ranging from small reptiles and amphibians all the way up to large mammals. He is trusted by zoos, vets, and the world's leading manufacturers. This allows him to offer professional and friendly advice tailored specifically to your needs, knowledge, and budget. Tomaskas also covers continued professional development and training for those of you who work in a pet store, a vet clinic, or a zoo environment, and all advice given is protected by insurance. Thomas is available for both in-person and virtual consultations. If you are looking for more information on Tomaskas, make sure you head to tomaskas.com. That is TOMASKAS.com.
I'll probably, I don't know if we'll have time to walk through every single day. So I'll probably just go through kind of the main highlights. And
yeah, you can give us the Spark Notes.
Yeah, the Spark Notes version. I got to pull up the itinerary here. We did see a few more species kind of along the way. And in like the Enchikaya, the birds there, holy smokes. I know this is not a bird podcast, but I just have to say to those of you who love birding, if you haven't been to Colombia, do it. Like, do it immediately.
There's some amazing species.
Yes. Yeah. I have some pictures of some really cool various different species of hummingbirds and stuff like that. And it's just like nothing in this world. Like hummingbirds that are, like 6 to 8 inches. Like here we just don't see that kind of stuff. And the sound they make when they whiz by your head is like, oh geez, what was that? And you see this thing darting through the leaves and you're like, wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah, anyways, back to frogs. We did end up seeing Endinobates bombates as well, which is kind of a frog that you really don't hear about often in the hobby. It's a very beautiful frog with kind of a red face and then like black and white spotting towards the back. And then what else do we have? I'm just scrolling through my photos to see some of the highlights.
Yeah, please.
And I can send some to you as well to play for people.
Sure.
What else? Oh, we saw the very large form, or these are Enchikayensis is what they call them. I'm pretty sure the hobby name is the Euphaga histrionica enchikaya. I don't know exactly. I'm sure Julio's going to smack me for that one. And then we ended up stopping on the way to the airport at the small form redhead population. And it's wild, their habitat, just how disturbed it is and how well they're doing with it. Like they're literally on a railroad track, like up a side of a mountain, essentially. So
weird.
The like bromeliads and stuff where they lay the eggs and stuff are up high, and the frogs just kind of go all the way up and down this cliffside. And it was like, I thought the tour guides were pranking us. Like we get out, we start walking, we reach this area and they're like, okay, start looking. And we're like, good one. we're not going to find any frogs here. And then sure enough, you start hearing the like, ruh, 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 and we're like, no way. There's awesome. Actually frogs here. And we ended up finding 10 or something in like, I don't know, 50-meter area. Like, wow, there's a ton of frogs there. So that was really, really cool and something that shocked all of us.
Yeah, that was one of those things where frogs. You think like, well, it's nice that they're thriving. It's kind of sad that their environment is sort of disrupted, but at the same time, at least they're not being wiped out.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's a certain degree of safety of being on like the edge of a cliff because, unless there's some very major construction, then they're probably mostly safe, assuming they're doing well where they are currently. Then after that, we kind of settled down in Cali. We ended up flying from Cali to Timbiquí, which is where the Phyllobates terribilis, or one of the most poisonous vertebrates on the planet, is. At least land vertebrates, I should clarify that. And that was the hike wasn't too bad, but it was fairly long. And it was really hot because now we've gone from, like 900-ish meters down to 250 to like 400 meters. So it's much hotter, much more humid, like just muggy. Like the air is thick in those places. Where we ended up finding the Phyllobates terribilis, we actually did find one with tadpoles on its back, which
Oh,
was
wow.
really, really cool. I guess we don't have evidence of this, so I can't say exactly how true it is. In that one area that we were, all three kind of morphs, I guess, color mutations essentially exist in that area, from mints to the orange, to the standard like yellow. Unfortunately, we only saw yellows, so I don't want to like claim anything, but
Mm.
that's what we were told. So that was very cool to see. And it's very strange just going through, and when you own dart frogs, like back here, there's no threat. They're completely harmless in captivity. When you are face to face with one of the most poisonous vertebrates on this planet, uh, it is a different sense. Like it's almost eerie.
Yeah.
Just how you handle them. Like we all had gloves and we're all safe. Tried to handle them as little as possible. But even just it hops on your arm and you're like, oh, it's like, how bad is this? Because we're
Yeah.
covered in bug bites and scratches and dings and stuff like that. So like there is a vector for this poison to get in your bloodstream.
So
Um,
how likely would it be to actually pass enough poison into your like through your skin? Because basically you probably have to eat the frog, I guess, to ingest it to have a real issue. Or
I
I mean,
don't
that
know.
would
I
definitely
mean,
kill you.
oh yeah, for sure. Um, I heard a story from one of the guides. Again, you never know how true anything is when it's the guides talking, because you never know. Maybe they want to scare you or whatever. But
Yeah.
take this with a grain of salt. But essentially, one of our guides, like from Sierra Wild, was taking photos of one, and they're in like an enclosed space. And over the course of a couple hours of taking photos, like he was starting to get like sick. So, you know, is that the frog? Is that something else? Like, we don't know exactly, but like when he left the room, he felt fine, that kind of deal.
Mm.
So, I don't know exactly what the details are, but I know our tour guide, while we were there, had gloves on, washed his hands with alcohol, like with the gloves on. And I mean, we're sweating buckets, right? So you're touching your neck, you're wiping your face, you're doing as much as you can to try and be
Yeah.
like to try and see essentially. And um, he was very irritated. He wasn't sick. He wasn't harmed, I guess, in a way. But he was certainly like, man, my neck burns. Like he had just wiped his neck. And then for the next couple hours, like he was saying, complaining how his neck hurt and how it kind of burned. So whether that's from a plant, whether that's from the frogs, like who knows? It could have been really from anything. But um, I would say, to answer your question, the likelihood is pretty low. But certainly, if you had an open cut, it would be worrisome if that frog kind of hopped on you, or you wipe your hand and you wipe your arm and just leave it there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it totally gives you a different, like it's slight, I don't say appreciation, because obviously you appreciate them in captivity as well, but there is something different about seeing, because they're so small. They're just little innocuous, little cute frogs. But then you realize, in that wild setting, they actually do have a potent poison that can actually be quite dangerous, whether, like we said, maybe not necessarily dangerous for a human in most circumstances, but they certainly are toxic. There's no question.
Oh, and they know it too. Like in captivity, I mean, the terribilis are very bold frogs. And they're kind of the like bulldogs of the frog world. You can walk up to them, they eat crickets, they'll pound down everything. But even in the wild, like they're bold. They know that nobody's gonna mess with them. They'll
Yeah.
hop right in front of you. You walk in front of it, and it just sits there. You're like, okay, like
That's
this
cool.
this little homie knows exactly what he's doing.
And it's interesting that those more behavioral traits kind of carry into the captive population as well, considering how many generations deep in captive, I don't know. Do you have terribilis?
I don't know.
Yeah. So, I mean, who knows how deep, how many captive generations there are for people that are keeping them, but that if they're still bold here in captivity as captive bred animals, it's pretty fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just to see that carry through of the the boldness and willingness to be out in the open and calling and just, yeah, very cool. Unfortunately, back to the story on that hike, we did miss out on seeing the Ufata sylvatica. That is the local population in that area. We heard them calling, but just couldn't get them down or couldn't have them in like a visible area. And I guess to kind of, now that we're 40 minutes into this, I'll paint the picture of like, this is not walking, I wouldn't say easy trails. A lot of it, you're going up 60-degree slopes, if not even more steep, and hiking through that stuff. Actually, in Timbiki, we saw a couple terribilis, and I was walking towards it, and I stepped, and my foot just went straight through the floor, and I like fell into a hole essentially. Like, thankfully, my one leg was out, but I didn't know I was that flexible. Like my whole all the way up to like the top of my thigh was deep into this hole. And like the guy thought I was joking. Like, yeah, I was like, guys, can you help me? And they're like, ha ha ha, like funny guy, he fell, whatever. And I was like, no. And I ended up pulling myself out, but it was like,
so what did it fall into? Like what kind of hole?
I have no idea. Yeah, like I don't know if it was essentially like eroded, like water eroded, and then it was just covered in leaf litter, and there was like space between roots and whatnot, and that's what I fell into. There was kind of like a dry riverbed nearby, so I don't know if maybe it had been covered and I just kind of reopened that one little area of it. But even stepping around it, like there was no hole to fall into, so it was that specific pressure point that just went straight through. And I had dirt like all the way up. Like I showed him, I was like, no, I was like in this hole. He was like, oh, I thought you were kidding the whole time.
Wow. So there's definitely, there's always an element of, it's not walking through a manicured national park in Canada or the United States. You are roughing it.
Yeah. And there was like set trails, and that happened off the set trail, of course, but even still, it's certainly nothing like walking any trails in Canada or the US or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what was next? Was there any, obviously frogs were kind of the main goal. Did you see any reptiles as well that you were excited to find?
Yeah. Like I mentioned, the species richness and diversity is high there, but the numbers is low. So we found a few. This is kind of backtracking to like those first few nights. We found Leptodyra, like a cat snake. We found Ementodes kenqua. What is that? I think it's a slug-eating snake. I don't know what the common name is for it right off the top of my head. But we saw like those reach throughout most of Mesoamerica. Like we saw a ton of those in Costa Rica as well. So for the people that this was like their first excursion and they were having a lot of fun, and those were really cool finds. But for me, having seen in the time we were in Costa Rica, I think we probably saw at least 10 of each. So it's kind of like, another one. Like, cool.
Yeah. Cool to start the trip, but you've seen it before.
Yeah, a little jaded. Like I'll admit, is kind of a spoiled like mentality of like, oh, okay, like that was one of those where I was like, oh, sick! Like we found a snake, that's awesome. Like you guys can take photos and like you spend your time with it. I'm good.
Yeah.
So, we found a few of those. Christian actually found. Oh man, it's a Dendrolaphus, I believe. I think I wrote down the species. It is the Dendrophidian clarki, or clarky if you're from Colombia, otherwise known as the rainbow forest racer.
Oh, okay.
We got there.
We'll put the picture up so people can see.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was really cool. Like Christian, one of the Sierra Wild boys, he actually spotted that while we were driving. And he was like, snake. And he rammed on the brakes and hopped out and grabbed it. And,
wow. That's a small snake, though. I'm surprised I guess they got eagle eyes.
That, and also we were on like a dirt road, so we weren't going very fast. And thankfully it was on kind of don't know if karst like area is the right word, but essentially like kind of a rocky like rubble pile essentially, and it stood out like a sore thumb. So a bright green snake on kind of whitish rocks, and he was like, "Oh, snake!" and he ended up grabbing it. So that was very cool. Very happy with that. In terms of other reptiles, back to Timbiki where we kind of left, went on that little side quest of telling that story. We did find, or I found a forest anole, I guess. It's Dactyloa. Oh boy, here we go again. Latifrons. So that was a really cool find, and was totally random. Like we had reached the end of our hike and we're all just kind of chilling. We're all dumping buckets of sweat and just relaxing for a little bit, taking some photos of frogs. And we basically, like, there's a big vine kind of going up in front of me. I was just sitting there and happened to like focus my eyes on the vine in front of me. And sure enough, I was like, is that that's a lizard. Like it was almost like a Europlatus, like it blended in so perfectly with the branch and was just sitting there. And so I ended up grabbing it and it like slipped through my fingers, but thankfully the like tree it was on, or vine I guess, was, maybe 10 or 15 feet tall, but it was thin, like it was something like that. And it like ran up, so I just like hit the tree and it fell from the tree and I just caught it on the way down.
That's cool.
So yeah, that was a really cool find. But in terms of, and then later on in the trip we also did find a couple vipers. We saw a fertilance and a hognose pit viper, both of which were juveniles at the latest. Like they were very small. And that's
no boas.
No boas.
Damn, I guess they're hard to find.
Boas. Yeah. Dave was actually bugging me about seeing boas there, and I was like, dude, good luck. Like,
because has he gone there to find? I know he's found boas in the wild, but not in Colombia, or
yeah, he wants to find them in Colombia. And I literally, he was like, did you find boas? I was like, nope. And then I just was like, good luck, man. Like, have fun. I hope you book a month off, because
like the biggest species out there.
Yeah. And I'm sure local tribes and stuff use them as food, because I know a 6 to big, 10-foot snake is a huge boa. That's a lot of meat. No boas. We were really hoping to find Bushmaster. Yeah. But that was a little too ambitious. Unfortunately, didn't find that. And then in terms of reptiles, like we really didn't see much. There's a few other, morning geckos and other like smaller species of anole, but really not a whole lot. Like this truly was a dedicated like dart frog tour. It's called like the title of it was like Colombian Dendro Tour. Like it was just meant to be dart frogs, and then kind of anything else that we found was a bonus.
Yeah. But it sounds like you hit a lot of the. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and I can kind of go further into it a bit later when we get to that point. But we did find some caiman.
That's cool.
We also did find a canopy lizard, the Polychris. I know. Oh, what's his name?
Is it Roy?
Yeah, Roy.
Yeah.
Roy keeps them.
Is it?
This is not the species that he has, though. This is the
okay. Yeah.
And of course, I didn't write it down. Yeah, it's a Polychris. It's one of the canopy lizards.
Yeah, they're like a monkey anole or whatever. I forget what species, like common name, the ones Roy keeps, but that's cool.
Yeah, that was really cool. And for me, that was also really cool for Bree, because she really loves them. Like she wants them really badly. And from Roy, of course.
Yeah.
So I sent her, I was so excited. Just like, Bree's going to love this photo. Like I was excited for her, even though she wasn't there. It was a really cool species that I didn't even realize they were in that area. We were just walking through rivers with our boots, and they ended up finding it. And of course I was the last one to find it. They're like, no, we're going to shine our lights here and you guys are going to stare at it until you find this lizard. I was like, well, I don't like, is it small? Is it big? Like, what am I looking for? And it blended in very well. And then eventually I found, I was like, oh my God, that was,
It's like those
here's
games
my
that people,
herping card, like take it
yeah,
from me.
like those games that people post on Facebook, like find the lizard or whatever on the picture, and then you're just like,
Yeah.
damn it, I can't see anything.
Yeah. And I think it would have been easier to see with it, like just my light, because I would be able to control like where I'm looking, but everybody was blasting their light at it. So everything was kind of uniformly green.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm just trying to make excuses, really.
That's all right. One miss once in a while is not a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. Back to the kind of frogs and whatnot.
Yeah.
The little plane we took, we
Yeah. How are
ended up
those?
going. They were cool. They're a bit bigger than I expected them to be. Like when they pitched the trip, it was like these are going to be like Cessnas. It's going to be like us and that's it. And they're a bit bigger than that. They were probably 25-person planes, still tiny in comparison to what you and I are used to flying in.
Yeah.
But after taking the one plane back to Cali, we then flew to another area. And oh no, I missed on the way back. We ended up seeing the bullseye. So Faga, I don't know what their classification is now. I think they are still Histrionica, but Histrionica bullseye. And that was another population that was like essentially just off like farmland and like a random batch of trees. But their population was strong. I think in half an hour of looking, we probably turned up 15 frogs, like
Wow.
and more just calling everywhere. Like it was a pretty cool experience. Like having Tyler was kind of our not guide, but like he doesn't like dart frogs a whole lot. Like he came on the trip for more of the experience. And so, while we were all taking photos and stuff, he's like, I'm going to find more stuff. And so he's out there just grabbing frogs and seeing all these frogs and like, guys, I got this one. And
That's
then,
cool.
I found this one and all this stuff. So it was cool to see that and just kind of everybody like fit into their roles, of just looking and running, and some people were ahead, and obviously I was at the back, and yeah, it was very cool to see. We did see incredible variation. So for the people that keep dart frogs in captivity, especially the large obligates, a lot of times we'll hatch kind of an orange one or not quite as red or a little bit more drab. And after seeing the variation in captivity or in the wild, it really questioned my ability to kind of reverse that in captive populations, because like there's a few frogs here. I can send you like a couple pictures. But like there's one bullseye with like two dots on its back. Then there is like a bright orange one, so not red at all. And
Yeah,
then
because for those who don't know, there's people think in captivity they're not holding their vibrancy of color and they're starting to get duller and duller. But what you're saying is, that might just be the genetics in that specific line of frogs, or you see that variation in the wild, basically.
Yeah, and to be fair, there is definitely things we can do to kind of increase the red in the frogs that we have in captivity, like feeding carotenoids and just feeding a varied diet, feeding as like a good vitamin supplementation, that kind of deal. So if you're not doing that, then yeah, maybe you are causing it to be a bit more drab. But even people that are doing that and finding, oh, well, this froglet is yellow and this froglet's bright red, like even some of the ones that I have behind me, just the variation off the same diet. I have one almost entirely orange frog, and then I have one almost entirely yellow frog. So it's like a froglet, I should say. So it's like, okay, well, their parents were raised on the same food. They were all raised on the same food, same vitamin schedule. Like everything's all the same, as controlled as you can be, essentially, in a non-lab setting.
Yeah,
and they are completely different. So very cool. Something that I definitely took note of and was like, huh. Even sitting there, I was like, wow, this is the amount of variation is much higher than I expected.
Yeah, so you don't have, as a keeper, maybe you don't have to spend as much time and energy trying to figure out why your frogs look different, and just realize that's just part of their nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I think it's an interesting insight, at least
Yeah, for
kind of
sure.
what I was thinking. Um, and then we ended up stopping and finding, uh, I believe the scientific name for them is Ufaga andresi, and the kind of hobby name for them is the Ufaga histrionica tato. And those were some of the most spectacular frogs that we saw the entire time. They were like a uniform, kind of like an orangey caramel color, and then just like with a few little patterns of like black striping and stuff like that. Like I'll show you, you'll see them, so you can show the viewers as well. And just not at all we expected. Like we were so shocked to see these animals in
Is that a
captivity.
species in captivity?
Yep. Yeah, we do have them here. A lot of times they're kind of like, ironically, what we just said, a little bit more drab and a little more brown. Sometimes some can have some nice like reds and oranges, but those are, the nice ones. And these were like, these blew anything I've ever seen out of the water.
Wow.
And actually on that trip, we ended up finding kind of climbing up like a cliffside, and there was a really nice like waterfall with a pool under it. And this is about halfway through the trip, and it was time. I was like, you know what? I don't care. I'm getting in this water. And so myself, Nick, and Tyler ended up hopping in, and there's like cliff jumping spots. So we were jumping off the sides, and that was like one of my favorite moments of the trip, because I love waterfalls. Like I could sit by next to one all day. I could have sat there all day just sitting in the water, but it was like, kind of enjoying this awesome moment with great friends. And those are the kind of moments that I live for on these trips. Like seeing the frogs, great. Seeing the animals, great. Experiencing the culture, fantastic. The food was amazing. But those just little moments of like, I don't want to say tranquility and sound like a super hippie, but that's kind of what I'm going for, is like,
Yeah.
just like clairvoyant moments of like, wow, like I'm in a jungle in the middle of Colombia, swimming in a waterfall. Like, what? Just kind
like
of surreal,
every problem at
is
home just disappears.
Oh, absolutely.
Every like work thing, taxes, bill, whatever, just gone.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's just totally like live in the moment, enjoy it, and live like enjoy the fruits of your labor. Essentially, like you've just been spent the last 4 or 5 days hiking harder hikes than I've ever done in my entire life. My feet were swollen, my hip hurt, like that kind of stuff. But you know what? This is what's all worth it. That kind of feeling. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. And then I don't know if you want me to just kind of keep going through, or
yeah, like maybe if there's
questions or anything.
Well, I do have a question. One of the pictures that you had posted, that a few of you had posted, was you're standing on like a hill almost overlooking like green mountains, basically. Where was that? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, I think maybe it was your profile picture now, or you've recently changed. I saw Kayla post one and Nick post one as well. So obviously, you guys took this advantage of this incredible scenery. Where was that?
That was the incredibly hard hike on day 2.
Okay, yeah. So you earned a good view then.
Yeah. The view was incredible. It was really, really neat. And as much as we were dying, you got to try and take it in.
Totally, yeah. And that's like an area that's just like totally untouched. It's just you're looking into this vast, basically forest on these mountains, and yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, but the irony of it is like we're standing on cow pasture.
Right.
Yeah, so it's like untouched forest, and then it's like random like cow land.
As long as you don't look behind you, it looks pretty pristine.
Yeah. In front of us, pristine wild jungle. Behind us,
yeah.
So that was where that was.
Okay, cool.
Now kind of jumping forward, I'm sure I'm missing a little bit of details here and there, but if you guys want the full details and the full lowdown, like I will be posting a couple videos to my channel. So
Yeah.
check it out there. The flight that we made into a place called New Key was the smallest plane that we were on. And I took a photo of me. I'll try and get it kind of in frame here, but like I took a photo of me sitting in the seat and I could go like this and touch the roof.
Oh my God. It's like 6
Yeah.
inches above your head was the
Yeah.
ceiling.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was like, wow. And I mean, it was like a 20-minute flight. So it's not like it was crazy long sitting uncomfortably for hours, but it was funny. Like I sat down and it was just kind of like this. I look like a giant. Like,
Yeah.
I'm
That's kind of scary though. Like, it's not the same as getting in a big like 737, 747.
no, not at all. Yeah, it was like, you climb up a little ladder on the back of the plane and kind of mosey your way down the aisle and sit in your chair and hope that it's not too bumpy.
Yeah. Were those flights
Yeah.
pretty bumpy? Like, were they pretty rough?
No, surprisingly, they were actually pretty good. Like there's definitely a few little patches of turbulence and stuff, but they were as smooth as any other flight I've ever been on. In fact, smoother than a lot of flights that I've been on. So yeah, can't complain too much about that. And now this is kind of to put everybody in kind of a timeline. Like this is the last 3 days essentially of the trip. So the trip ended on the Friday, the 15th of March. And so this was, 3 days before that. And we went to an area. I don't even know the name of the town, like genuinely can't remember. And I don't even think there's no sign, there's nothing like that there. And it's basically like a town that exists on like the delta of a river and the ocean. So
Oh, wow.
they're literally, a 3-minute boat ride out into the ocean. And we were like boating through the ocean to get to this town. It's a heavily tidal area. So when tide's out, the beach that is normally there is even bigger. Like you can probably walk an extra 200 meters or so on this beach. Maybe not that far, but about 100 meters on this beach that is now exposed because the sea retracts so much. And then when it's high tide, the entire town floods.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're all built on stilts. Like it's not like you're walking through water in your home, but yeah, the whole water floods and all the walkways and stuff throughout the town are all 2 feet deep in water. And when basically we got there, we were all dead tired, so we all kind of passed out. Or I think the rest of the group was just chilling and listening to music and stuff. But myself and Caesar, one of the guides, we were staying in like another building because the original place didn't have enough accommodations for us. So we were staying elsewhere. And I remember like falling asleep and then waking up to like sloshing, like kids playing, but it was like water. And I was so confused. Like I woke up, like opened the curtains, and was like, what the hell? Like, are you kidding me? And so that was I guess a waking up, like a very eye-opening moment, that's for sure.
That seems like such an inconvenient thing to have to deal with. That's like a daily occurrence.
Twice daily. Yeah.
Twice daily. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, like basically every 12 hours ish, it was high tide. So
flooding out.
yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it was cool. Like we just trudged through the water, got back to the other building, and like looking down, I saw 2 puffer fish and like 5 eels just underneath the house. Like
that's cool.
Yeah, it was pretty neat. I was pretty stoked to see those. And that was the place where the Bahia Solano. So I know Alec and a lot of other people have talked about these, but these are basically jet black frogs with, like, if you've seen Star Wars, it's like a Darth Maul frog, like jet black with like bright red patches on it that vary from very spotty, I guess, is the term I'll use to describe them, to kind of bigger, like blotches of red across their whole back. And this is where we saw those. And those were, again, I probably said it about every frog, but like one of my favorite frogs. Just
Yeah.
the striking contrast, because a lot of the frogs that we saw, even like the bullseyes and stuff like that, they weren't totally jet black, or most of them weren't. Like there was some areas where it's almost more like a deep brown, almost black, but these were like a jet black frog with bright red spots.
That's cool.
And again, the variation comes in, like I mentioned already. Some were that bright red, and some were kind of more like a orangey color, and everything in between. So it was very neat to see. We didn't find as many of them, but we did see probably 4 or 5. And then I guess on the last night we were there, um, Christian, Caesar, Kayla, and Logan all went out on one last like herping adventure. Myself, Tyler, and Nick stayed back. We were just kind of done, and they were going to see glass frog. And to be fair, I didn't realize how nice this glass frog was. But the one thing that justified me staying back was they got dumped on. Like this was one of those, like what you'd expect when you hear the word rainforest. This is like, hours and hours of like deafening rain.
Oh God. And they're out there in the middle of the forest.
Yeah, they came back and everything was soaked. Like Kayla's passport was wet. Like everything was soaked. So,
and the thing about these countries is nothing dries. Like once it's wet, it's like that's not drying till you get home to your dryer.
Yeah. Or
just too humid.
Thankfully, we stayed the last 2 nights. Like after the trip was over, we stayed in like kind of like a bougie. We decided to splurge and stay in like a nice house, and it had like air conditioning, so we were able to properly dry everything
on the outside.
Yeah. So that was nice. But it was they were soaked, and like they saw the frog, and it was a beautiful, beautiful frog. But I don't regret it. I'm not gonna lie.
Don't regret it. You don't need to get soaked on the last night.
No, that's what I said. I was like, guys, I think it's gonna rain tonight. I'm gonna stay back. Like, I'm in pain, and we've had a great 2 weeks of herping, and frankly, this frog, like they also teased like, well, we might see a bushmaster, and I was like, if you guys see a bushmaster, I don't know what I'll do, but I doubt you will. And
yeah.
like, okay, and they didn't. So,
is that where they had Kayla eating termites?
Yes. Yep.
See, so you didn't really miss out.
No, not that night. I actually did go with her the one night. So in this area, we did a night herp the day we got there, like a couple hours after we got there, and that's when it was probably the most uncomfortable hike of the trip, just because we were walking through like deep. I mean, we had rubber boots on, but the rivers were deeper than our rubber boots. So every step you take, you're dragging along like 10-pound boots with you because they're completely full of water. So it was the most uncomfortable hike, I would say. But it wasn't bad. You're just walking through river systems. Like it wasn't a challenging hike. And that's where we saw the Dactyloa. We actually saw a caiman. Like we caught a baby caiman. What else did we find? A ton of basilisks. Am I missing? Oh, we saw a species of glass frog. It was really pretty. It's just, I mean, if you're picturing a glass frog, is a transparent green with some yellow spots on it. And that describes most of them. So I'm sure if anybody who loves glass frogs is listening, they'll probably hate that description, but whoops. It was very cool. It was a lot different. It was a nice change of pace.
Yeah.
And then they ate the termites on that one, and I ate them too. Like I tried them, and it was interesting. I didn't bother filming it. I was like, I don't need to film this, but like I'll try it, sure. And the description they gave is very accurate. It is like a weird, like minty kind of herb taste. Like it's very strange.
Not as bad as you would think.
No, God, no. Like I just think termite, right? Like ew, decaying wood and like gross, filthy creatures, and you like taste them, and you're like, oh, It's kind of nice, actually.
It's not bad. You can see why the anteaters are eating these things.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and
So
that kind of
that brings you to the end. You must have been
wraps
like
it
dead
up.
tired by the end.
Oh yeah, we were all just toast.
And then you have like a 6-hour flight home. So by the time you get back to your house, you're just dead.
Yeah, yeah, it was nice because we did book like I mentioned, like that weekend, like we stopped on Friday, and then Saturday we like rented I'll call it a mansion. Like it was a large house with like a pool and stuff, and we got alcohol and just kind of had like a relaxing, you know, fall asleep a few times for the day, wake up, have a couple drinks, like hang out in the
Yeah.
pool.
Like vacation
Um,
style.
exactly. Like we actually enjoyed this like vacation, and it was a really nice kind of bow tie on it because yeah, we were all dead tired. We were all varying degrees of like a pincushion for me in terms of bites from bugs, and most other people didn't get too many, but um yeah, just exhausted essentially
Yeah.
over most days where we didn't get a whole lot of sleep. We'd be up till uh between anywhere from like 11 till 2 in the morning, and then waking up at between 4 and 8 a.m. So really not getting much sleep. um the travel was mostly comfortable, all things considered, especially after Madagascar. That still stands as the worst place to travel, like within the country. um and yeah, we just enjoyed ourselves. And then the Sunday, technically morning, but it was like Saturday night. We left for the airport, had 2 hours of sleep, drove an hour and a half to get to the airport, and then flew home. So we flew from Medellin to Bogota, and then Bogota to Toronto.
Yeah. And that's another trip in the books.
It is, yeah. Yeah, it was.
That's amazing.
It
But
was
it sounds like you're
crazy.
doing it like the right way. Like you've kind of gone on 3 or maybe like 4 kind of major trips now. And it seems like every time you go, like you're getting better at making sure you're seeing the right things and getting like the actual herp experience that you're trying to aim for.
Yeah, and I do need to give good credit to Sarah Wild and Christian and Caesar, because truly without them planning this trip, I mean, there's a good chance we could have died. There's a good chance we could have been captured, or there's also just a good chance it just wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, it, yeah, huge shout out to them. If I'll plug them shamelessly. If you guys are in Costa Rica or wanting to do a trip with them, definitely reach out. They're on Instagram. They do have a Facebook channel as well, or YouTube page as well. Yeah, reach out to
Yeah.
them,
And
or
they're
contact
based
me as
in,
well, and I can kind of point you towards them.
they're based in Costa Rica, right? That's where
Correct.
they're from. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And like we said, I mean, without a tour guide like that, like you're going to get 10% of the trip as far as actually finding animals.
Well, that, and we don't speak Spanish,
Yeah, exactly.
so it's like you have to rely on hand signals and praying that you can pronounce coffee right. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it is amazing. Like, as a kind of aside, it is amazing how much you pick up on trips like that in terms of Spanish and whatnot. Just learning the local language. But obviously, if you didn't have like the guides who can speak both English and Spanish, then you have no idea what people are saying. Like,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Especially in a
yeah,
country like Colombia where that's actually could be, a life or death situation as far as the political climate goes.
yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah, it's
And so,
crucial.
do you have other trips planned already? Are you already thinking about the future, or are you just in recovery mode and just trying to, compile everything that you learned throughout the 2 weeks?
Mostly the latter. There's definitely like, where's the next place? Like that's kind of going on in my head. And obviously, like to me, we are booking like a trip to Animal Con as well as
Mhm.
Tinley, because they're a week apart. They're back-to-back weekends in October. So we are planning that. Actually, we're like booking stuff this weekend. Um, and there's a chance that I might just do something a little bit easier and take Bree and stuff and go to Costa Rica for a week or something in November.
Mm.
But yeah, no huge plans as of right now.
Yeah. Well, it sounds
So
like you've done a lot, especially because I'm trying to remember, when did you go to Madagascar? Was it 2023 or is it
yeah,
2022?
January 2023.
Okay. So it was like, a year ago, basically, just over a year ago.
Yeah, just over a year ago.
Yeah. And maybe we don't have to get deep into that trip, but could you list off a few like the key things that you went with Bill Strand, or maybe just tell us who you went with and some of the key species you saw, because it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it was a remarkable trip, and big shout out to Dion for organizing it, Reptiliatus. So we went with a whole laundry list of people, and I'll probably miss somebody, but Dion, Adam, Dave Kaufman, Bill Strand, myself, Nadim, our videographer, I guess. Was there anybody else? I think that's it.
Mm. Pretty good crew.
Yeah, it was a great crew. It's a great crew.
Some of the big reptile names out there.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and like some of the highlights for me, oh boy, a lot of them, like we saw, I think 24 species of chameleon in 2 weeks.
That's incredible. So
that alone is just insane. We saw Europlatus fantasticus, Europlatus sakurae, it stands out to me even to this day, but there was some like almost like a boega-ish snake that we found. And it was like a bright red with kind of a dark, like blackish red head. And like, I have no clue the name of it right off the top of my head, but that was like a showstopper. And then for me, the kind of the holy grail, as like somebody who should have had a primatology minor, the injury, the world's largest extant lemur species, was remarkable. Like hearing their calls, you can hear their calls from, I think, something like 2 to 3 miles away, and just hearing them like shrieking in the background and then being directly under them when they're calling, and it's like ear-shatteringly loud. Was literally, I have a clip of me crying while hearing it. Like this is the first time hearing it up close, and I just have a tear rolling down one cheek.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I do have those videos still coming.
Come on, we want to see those.
I know.
Well, that's one of those animals that you obviously understand that it's a wild animal, but for whatever reason, your imagination doesn't allow you to kind of put it into a natural landscape. I don't know how to explain that, but when your brain almost can't compute it being wild because you see it in the zoo or whatever, but when you're actually in its habitat, it's probably such a bizarre experience.
Oh yeah, it was. And I know totally what you mean. Like when you say lemur, you think of like Zabumafu if you're kind of around our age.
Yeah.
And, ringtail lemurs in a zoo near you, that kind of deal. You like you said, you really don't picture them like leaping through the trees and jumping and, kind of traversing the ground. Like the injury have different like orientation of like their hips and stuff, so they kind of like walk really weird on the ground and like do like a bit of a hop, whereas the ringtails and stuff are definitely more adept and can traverse the actual like terrestrial landscape much easier. But that it was very special, and like we mentioned kind of earlier, it was very sad. Like it was kind of an overwhelming feeling for most of the group. I know for Dion and I for sure. Oh, I forgot to mention Alec came with us. He's going to beat me that I didn't say that.
Yeah.
But like certainly myself and Dion, I wouldn't say struggled with it, but like it was definitely a present thought for a lot of the time, just driving and seeing like, a little patch of rainforest and then just completely clear cut. Now it's rice fields and honestly predominantly rice fields. That's what they grow there.
Yeah.
So,
but you could definitely imagine it being pretty conflicting just being in that environment.
Oh yes. Yeah. It was a mental struggle.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, I think Dion's released a couple of videos. You will eventually release some videos on Madagascar. I know those they're a beast to edit.
Yeah, they are.
And
especially
then YouTube
the way
punishes
I edit
you.
mine. Like
it's
not my average video. Like when I was editing it last year, uh, I still have it as like one of the best videos I've ever made. And like I think I'm about 17 or 18 minutes in right now. So I might just like wrap it up and just post that. And then if there's a part two, there's a part two. If not, then at least you get something from it. But
Yeah, because
yeah,
you go way more like what's the word?
like cinematic.
Yeah, cinematic. Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
why I forgot that word. When you're doing those travel ones, like you did with your Costa Rica videos as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I
That's
like that.
I enjoy that. I'm hoping to kind of emulate it to a certain degree, but I also filmed like for Colombia, but um I also filmed like a couple more like dedicated videos as to finding the golden frog, the golden boys and dart frog. I also did something a little bit different. I did like a Viv inspiration, like
Mm.
just kind of taking clips and photos of like tree stumps and like interesting scenery that I thought would be cool, and I'll put together something like that. I have no idea that probably will do terrible, but I know at least a few of my friends were like, "Can you please do that?" And I was like, "You know what? Sure. Like if you guys
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
see it, I might as well. Worst case, it doesn't get that many views, and who cares?" Like,
yeah. It'll be valuable to somebody.
yeah, exactly.
Well, I'm sure. Hopefully, those are out in the next couple of months. So people can really kind of get the full background on some of those. People will already be wanting those videos out by the time they listen to this, so I'm sure they won't be too far away.
Do you know when this is going live?
This will be in a couple weeks. I think there's two more in front of this one, so
Okay,
like
so
3.5 type weeks.
I should for sure have the first one out. Like the Tesoros tour for sure will be out. I'm saying it now, so it's got to happen.
Yeah. Now you're
And
locked
then
in.
yeah, and then I actually do have a tour of one of my good friends' places, totally unrelated to Colombia, but that'll be coming out hopefully as well because I'm on that grind for 100K. I'm almost there.
We can do this. Are you at 90 now or?
I'm at like
Oh my God, we're
99.7 or
right there.
something. Yeah.
Okay, so you're gonna get there. So if you are not subscribed to Mike's channel right now, go do it because you can you can help him get there. It may already be done by the time they listen to this, but
That's possible,
it
yeah.
so congrats on that, by the way, too.
Thank
And
you.
we'll be looking forward to those videos. Is there anything else that you wanted to say or anything before we wrap up on this episode?
I don't know. I know you kind of mentioned maybe chatting a little bit about the room and what's happening. I don't know if you
Yeah.
have
I would
time
love
for
to
that
just
or not.
yeah. Let's take a couple minutes, and I just want to make sure there was nothing else on the trip or anything that I think we kind of covered most of our bases there.
Yeah, I think I rambled a sufficient amount.
Yeah. No, it's all good. And so yeah, give us a little bit because you guys do have a really interesting room. You're working with a lot of different species. You are pretty good about doing room tours every couple of months. People can get a good sense of the vibe in your room. But why don't you, for those who have not seen your room, can you tell us some of the species you work with, you and Bree?
Yeah, so I guess it is important to mention my partner Bree. Her and I have been together for 4 years, 4.5 years. It's blurred lines. Uh, and I ended up moving here to kind of combine forces, and that was about 3 years ago. So now currently we work with, oh boy, I'll list her projects kind of first. Chihuahua geckos, pine isle chihuahuas, I should say. She also does gray bands, which will start breeding either next year or the year after because they have a very long maturity for them. Then hognoses are kind of her primary focus in the room. Then she also has the frogs right next to me. You can kind of see the tank there. They're the Mexican leaf frogs or Mexican tree frogs, or whatever you want to call them. They're the Agaliacnus dacnycolor. Um, and then we're kind of joint projects, or no, I guess she has the Boega as well, the Boega nigriceps,
That's
which
right.
are a rear fang venomous species from Southeast Asia. Um, and they have a huge distribution across South Asia and Southeast Asia. Um, Looking around to make sure I don't forget anything.
What about the
Kind of
Gonyosoma?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So we do have just a female currently of the Gonyosoma oxycephalum, the red-tailed rat snake. It's a Borneo locale. So a red-tailed rat snake actually has like a silver or like a blue tail. She's gorgeous. That's Bree's probably like top snake. Um, And then she also has a couple of her kind of own pets. Like we have the blue tongue skink, the northern blue tongue skink. And then just behind me down below, we have a Thai bamboo rat snake. And
Mm.
that's kind of her pets essentially. And then myself, I got a few different frogs going. I have Ufaga pumilio, both the bastimentos as well as the Bahia Grande. And then I have the large Ufaga, which is the Ufaga histrionica fuego, as well as the blue histrionica. So a bright blue frog. And then my kind of passion project is the Tachydromus species. We did a podcast on that that did very well. And I have a lot of people actually reach out to me being like, I heard your podcast. Like, so it was cool. And thank you for the platform to do that on. That was great.
Yeah, that was great. I see a lot of comments that come like, this is the like people like, I've never heard of this species or this, this genus. I want to get into them. And they fit a lot of people's kind of list of characteristics they want in an animal, but a lot of people don't know about them. So yeah, it was really cool to do that with you and Armin.
Yeah, it was a blast. And it has even today, like not literally today, but like within the past couple of weeks, I've had a few people reach out like, hey, I just saw your podcast on Dylan's, like on the animals at home. And I'm really interested. Can you give me more information? So it's nice to be able to kind of reach out and just be like, hey, these things do exist. Like,
yeah, and they're cool.
Pay attention to them. Yeah, they're really cool. So those, I have two species. I have the Tachydromus dorsalis and the Tachydromus smardinus. And those are kind of like the main projects. We do have the Chianactis occipitalis, which I guess are mostly Brees as well, which are the western shovelnose snake, which are like an insectivorous species of snake from kind of the Southwest America, which is really cool, and I guess into Mexico as well. Then we just kind of have a couple oddballs. Like I have all my pets, Striker, my original leopard gecko, who's 20 years old now.
Yeah, he's still hanging on there, because I feel like when I was there 2 years ago, you were starting to kind of bring him down as far as like giving him more of a like not a hospital type tank, but simplifying his environment because he was getting geriatric, but he's still there.
Yeah, he is still there, and it is still simplified. So to give kind of context to those who don't know, essentially he was in like a nice naturalistic enclosure, plenty of space, lots of like plants, and it truly was like a nice viv, at least in my opinion. And I basically noticed that he was losing weight and just not doing well. He kind of lost some function to like his back legs, like they just don't work as well as they should. So I made the tough decision to essentially preserve his life. I will put him in, a typical breeder setup, just like paper towel, water dish, couple hides, and he's still kicking. He doesn't shed on his own anymore, but he's still eating like a champ, and he's still very alert and active. So I have had the conversation, for those of you that are concerned, with my vet, and essentially, just like monitor his quality of life. When that starts to slide, it's time. So,
yeah.
Tough conversation to have, but I definitely did. I chatted with him a bit about his opinion on the matter, and that's what he said. Man, other one-offs. I have the Uromastyx, which are the Uromastyx geri, or the Saharan Uromastyx. I love those guys. They're more so pets. Like we do have a female, so maybe they'll breed, but I'm really not concerned with them breeding. I'm just happy to have them, to be honest.
Yeah.
We have a couple different, or I guess now we just have one species of the chameleon geckos, the Urodactylodius symmetricus. So like a little small, with tail included, like 4-inch gecko from New Caledonia that, in my opinion, is better than most crested geckos, just because they're smaller, they're easier to handle, they don't like sail off your hand into the abyss. So we got those, and then we have a few different species of Australian geckos / and lizards, I guess. We have the beta geckos, or the Leucasium damium, and then we also have the helmeted geckos. which are two very small species from Australia that are very charismatic and funny to watch, and we hope to produce them, but we're not like really actively trying right now. And
I think
yeah,
those are type of species that hopefully will gain popularity. It's sort of like the Stenodactylus, right? You have animals that you can kind of keep as a colony. They're really small, so you don't need to have a huge enclosure while still offering them a huge amount of space, and it becomes much easier to set them up with a cool environment. And like you said, they are still very interactive. They're super cute, so they're very appealing to people. And yeah, hopefully that's the type of thing that continues to grow in popularity.
I really hope so. I think the difference and like what's kind of holding them back right now is just their availability.
Yeah,
But
Australian species.
yeah, exactly. And especially with all the shenanigans at the border right now and getting them from Canada to the US, because a lot of them do come into Canada. It's just we can't get them over to the US currently.
Mm.
So that's a pain in the butt, that's for sure. Um, and yeah, like their price point, like they're, tactless, whether uh, if you want to consider it good or not, they're a $20 bill will get you one. So wild caught, and there's the acclimation process and everything that's associated with that, but they're not hard to acclimate. They're pretty easy to acclimate. I know Dion's had probably like a 98% success rate with all the ones that he's brought in and
Yeah.
is keeping right now. So yeah, they're cute, like you said. They're charismatic. They're hilarious to watch. And I don't know what it is with Australian geckos, but they are the worst hunters. Like I have a few feeding videos on my channel, and in every one, it's like the gecko will take like 5 or 6 strikes at the cricket before it finally gets it. So it's comical that way. Um, yeah, I mean, there's a few species here or there. I can just list them off. Like we have the gray banded king snakes, we have the Arizona mountain king snakes. I have a savu python.
Mm.
There's the Scaphiophryne marmorata, which are the Madagascan rain frogs, which
Mm.
are really cool. And we actually did see in Madagascar as well. So that was really neat. Um, Morning geckos. I think that's everything.
Do
Yeah.
you guys have an overarching plan with what you're doing in that room? Do you think long term as far as maybe these some projects we want to breed, or do we want to become focused on selling captive reptiles in Canada, or are you just kind of doing what you do because you enjoy it?
As of right now, I think it would be kind of the latter of what you said. Like we do have a business. We do make it to expos when we have offsprings to sell. Um, but in general, it's mostly just right now, just because we like it. Like truly to me, as much as I would love to own like a reptile store or a pet store or something like that, or to, create my own, the limitations that comes with that is just something that I don't want to do right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice having paid vacation and not leaving your animals in some employee that you have no idea how they're going to do with your animals, what you're gone or while you're gone. So, um, yeah, right now it's mostly just kind of spreading the animals that we really enjoy, and trying to make a positive name. Sure, I'm fully aware of like the limitations that we have. Some of the enclosures are a bit small in my opinion, and stuff like that. But we're like you said, we're always working to increase, and with the reality of having to be in a new place probably in the next year-ish, 2 years. Um, that's something that we're gonna, especially once we have our own house and can actually do whatever we want in there, then it will be another level
Yeah, yeah,
of,
yeah.
everything will get stepped up. I know Bree's dream for like the Gonyosoma is like probably, I don't know, like a 7 by 3 by 6 or 7, like just a massive viv for that. And um, that's kind of what I hope. If I'm being honest, I kind of went through, especially right after Columbia, like I don't want to say epiphany or anything like that, but it was just kind of like I had the brief thought of like, you know what? I could do and just make like decrease the amount of animals and just have a really nice like showroom essentially.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so that's getting kind of real, but yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah.
had those and like obviously, there's two of us in here and that's how we can maintain all these animals. There's no way with a full-time job, YouTube, trying to have a social life, that kind of deal, that we'd be able to maintain this
Yeah,
without
and
the
you
two
guys
of
work
us.
like really well together as a team. At least when I was there and watching, Bree work or you work, it's not like if you're someone like me who when I leave I only have 6 animals, whatever it is, it's still like I have to explain so much to people that are looking after them. And even though I'm not asking them to do much, it's very different when if you had like Bree is as much of a reptile person as you,
Oh yeah.
and so you guys can just combine your forces and be able to manage what the space you're doing. And even though you saying some enclosures are small, a lot of them are set up. I mean, you look at the enclosures behind you; they're beautifully set up. Lots of live plants. It's a pretty amazing room. And like yeah,
Thank you.
you need two people to manage it for sure.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we strive for. Like we love setting up habitats, even if, like I mentioned several times now, they're a little small. They are well set up. They are naturalistic, I'll say, skirting around the bioactive word, but um yeah, like we put our heart into it, and it's a standard that I would like to see um more of the hobby move to. And don't get me wrong, I can't be like, it's a little bit hypocritical because we do have snakes and bins and such, but
Mhm.
I guess that's another conversation for another time. But we try our best. We keep it clean. We clean their waters. Like everything is well maintained.
Yeah.
And keeping in mind that we are selling snakes, so you know I know Bree's plan for kind of expansion, and when we have our own place, is actually, you can kind of see it just on the side here. Like that's our adult rack, and those are I think they're like 3 feet wide by about 18 inches deep by like 8 inches tall, somewhere around there, for hog noses, and that's more than what most people keep their breeder ball pythons in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just as like a little perspective for the viewers, and that's what our hog noses are in. So she does want to have like a stack essentially of like PVC vivariums for them when we move out. It's just space
Space.
limitations. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a really cool room, and it's always fun to watch you go through your update videos, which you do pretty regularly. So people want like an individual walkthrough of each enclosure. You're pretty consistent with that on YouTube. I'm not sure your last one was probably not that long ago.
I think I posted it like the day I left for Colombia. So yeah, it would have been March. Um, that's at this point, that's most of what the channel is right now,
Yeah,
is
yeah,
mostly just kind of keeping up with things. But I'm hoping as projects wrap up, as vivariums are built, I'll have more builds and stuff like that on the channel. It's as another content creator, and I'm sure there's some of you listening, you post what the viewers watch, and
yes,
unfortunately random little posts don't get the views. But if I spend a few hours and make a reptile room tour, it does well. So
yeah, yeah.
it's
Yeah, you did this whole video showing a tutorial of how you did something, and it's like, oh, 8 people saw that.
yeah.
I might
Yeah.
as well just have cut half the time and done it, and then just shown them after. This is what I
I could
did,
just
rather than filming.
FaceTime them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Here you guys go. But you could just do it like within the tour. Like here's the enclosure that I just did, rather than doing like a dedicated video to it. It's just the funny. But the people that watch those videos do appreciate them too. So
Yeah,
it's
I
kind
appreciate
of give
that.
and take.
Yes.
But anyway, Mike, this was an amazing conversation. It's always I find it fascinating hearing about your adventures and all the information that you gather from those experiences. So we'll maybe you don't have anything on the books for the next trip, so we'll have to do another podcast before then, probably at some point. But for
Okay.
those who for some reason have no clue where to find you, I want them to go subscribe so we can get you over that 100,000 mark. But can you tell the YouTube and Instagram and whatnot?
Yeah, so YouTube's just at Mike Tytula, or if you search Alpha Reptile, it'll also likely come up. And then my Instagram is alpha.reptile. And yeah, you can give me a follow there. I'm definitely more active on Instagram than YouTube. Like I post there at least stories and stuff fairly regularly, but the YouTube is a little bit more time investment. So
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'll make sure that's all in the show notes for folks as well. So until the next one, Mike, and we'll talk before then, obviously, but until the next official conversation, it was great to have you on the show. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you very much, and happy to share all the experiences with you guys, and hope your audience enjoyed, and hope you enjoyed the conversation as well.
All right, that is the end of that episode. Mike, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast and sharing your stories. And I think myself and the listeners can kind of vicariously live through some of the pictures and stories that you've told here tonight. Listeners, thank you so much for listening to the episode. If you did enjoy it, make sure you share it on social media, Facebook or Instagram. That does really go a long way to help finding new people to listen to the show. Of course, that's always the goal. The more people we have listening to the show, the more we can do with the show, because the podcast continues to grow. And I am just so grateful for everybody who is supporting me up till now. If you do want to show your support more so than just sharing on social media, you can do that at Patreon at patreon.com/animalsathome. You can also check out the show's sponsor, customreptilehabitats.com. There is an affiliate link in both the show notes and the YouTube description. If you use that link, a commission comes back to me at no extra cost to you. And I think that is it for this one, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in as always, and I will catch you in the next episode.